Okay. Okay.
It's a wonder that we didn't join an acapella group.
An acapella orchestra group specifically. I was trying to mimic, I don't know, a violin.
It was good. Hello, and welcome back to Remake Hot Take, the podcast where we play studio executives who pitch new remake ideas on our favorite and new media. I'm Marriya Schwarz.
And I'm Brooke Rees. And today we are taking a look at the new series. I don't know if they plan on doing any other seasons. It feels more like mini-series-esque to me. I'm not really sure where they could go from here. I guess they could explore like more characters from within that story.
I think it's a mini-series just because I know you can add it on Letterboxd.
Oh, okay.
And usually those are one-timers.
Really? Okay. So we're doing Queen Charlotte, a Bridgerton story. For those of you who, I don't know what percentage there is, but for those of you who only listen to the audio version of the podcast, you're freaking missing out. And I would encourage you to click on the YouTube or the TikTok or any of our like social media links. Because I have about like 15 solid pounds of wig on my head. And I just wanted to give a brief statement that I worked on this wig on my like hour-long unpaid lunch break from my 8 to 5 job. I own 2 wigs. One of them is this pink one. I mean, the other one's also pink, but it's a different pink. But one of them is this pink one, which for like the second week in a row, she's been put through her paces. She's like a $10 synthetic, very cheap wig. And I have made her work for her like stay here. Like she's putting in rent money right now. So you should check out our YouTube and our TikTok and any other places that we repost our visual side of the podcast, because you're just missing out. And also I will have like an excruciating migraine after this is filmed, because it's only been on like 40 minutes and I'm already in searing pain. And also if I'm less emotive, for our visual viewers, that's because this is being held up by like my forehead bone. So the crown is kind of like, I don't know. I did well in my physics class, but there's some sort of fulcrum anchor situation happening here, and it's all resting right here on my like frown line. So if I'm not like giving much in the face, it's not because I don't want to be here. It's because we're all riding on this. So just so you know, just a PSA to our visual viewers.
What is it like to bear the brunt of the podcast, not on your shoulders, but on your forehead?
On my single frown line on my forehead. It's hard. And honestly, like 2 seconds of this wig wearing, I'm having like a whole new appreciation for not only Queen Charlotte, but the entire cast Bridgerton, because I'm sure they had, professionals and not someone putting together a $20 wig on their lunch break.
We don't know. Netflix apparently doesn't pay much.
Netflix could be cutting corners, that's true. But this is on top of 2 shower caps stuffed with paper towels. And then the wig is on backwards, pinned to the top shower cap. And then we got all these pin curls happening. There's like 50 bobby pins in here. It's like a very tenuous situation. It could crumble at any moment. Shout out to the Bridgerton costume, hair, and makeup team, because this is difficult. But anyways, I was the one that had suggested the Queen Charlotte mini-series to Marriya, because I watched it. I think it just came out like 2 weeks ago or something, pretty recently, like 2 weeks ago, I think, right when it came out. I watched it with my mom. So another shout out to Deb here. She was here for the Hunger Games. She's here for the Queen Charlotte. She gave me the tip for the shower cap placement of the bump up the wig there. But she really wanted to watch it because surprisingly, like, Deb is like an avid film consumer. Like she's like a film bro, honestly. It was a bit off-putting. She was like, oh yeah, I'm just finishing up Succession, and then I watched like Yellowstone and Yellow Jackets and like all these things that I like see people talking about, but I'm like, I don't have time for that. I'm watching Vampire Diaries. Like, I am consumed by like early 2000s to mid 2010s media, but she watches like every new thing. Maybe like closer to a year ago now, I was watching the Kate and Anthony season 2 of Bridgerton. And I was like, this is great media. And then my mom randomly was like, I love Bridgerton. I've seen it all. I was like, what? I was like, okay. So then when this came out, I was home for the week. I was like, Deb, you ready? You ready for Queen Charlotte? And she was like, let's do it. And then I watched the first episode, and I'm just like someone where if I can't be guaranteed that like the new media is going to make me feel like not anxious at all, completely fine, just happy little show, happy little movie, I don't want to consume it. And also if I don't like love something within the first episode, I'm very much like a love it or list it. I'm listing it. I don't watch it. If it's not good after the first episode, I don't really give anyone the benefit of the doubt. So in my opinion, I thought it started out a little bit slow, but Deb was like, we got to keep churning. We got to keep doing this.
When is Deb
So
making a podcast?
like literally, I was like, I may like abandon you, Marriya, or she can just become our third. one of the two is happening. But I was like, Mom, do you want to do the podcast with us? But she had previous engagements, seeing her sister this weekend. She's booked on, a tour. But she was like, no, we got to keep watching. Because I was like, can we watch Kindergarten Cop with Arnold Schwarzenegger instead?
You really love that movie.
Yeah, I was like, let's do it. It was on Netflix at the same time. And she was like, no, we must persist in our exploration of new media.
Well, because she had to turn in her review. I think she's secretly like a TV reviewer for.
No, oh shoot, a bobby pin just came out. I literally, we'll ignore that. We'll have a bobby pin count at the end.
It's like it's like Jenga. Which one is gonna make them all fall down?
We can just like go through piece by piece. That one was an easy one to get out. So it's like literally when I like lift my brow bone there, shit's going wild. But no, I literally was like, Mom, you should be like a film and TV like movie reviewer, like Call Up TV Guide, like they're ready for you. But yeah, she was like, no, we got to keep watching it. And I'm really glad that we did, because I ended up like sobbing at the end. I was like, oh my God, this is beautiful. What a show. And I was just like watching like TikTok, like edits, like love edits of the two of them. And I was like, this is beautiful. Oh my God. So I was like, what do you want to do this week for the pod, Marriya? And that was one of the options. And then Marriya had never seen Bridgerton, so she was like, do I need to see Bridgerton in order to watch this? And I want to like, I guess I'll be curious. I think the flash forwards or like actually the present time clips are probably where you were most confused by not knowing the characters before, but everything in the prequel of the flashbacks of Queen Charlotte and George, you didn't need to have any previous knowledge of. But yeah, and then I don't know, but we can get into our overall impressions. I think you liked it, or like you at least were excited to talk about it, because Marriya texted me and she was like, I thought this was going to be a trashy teen TV show, which I was like, thank you. Like, thanks. I'm glad that that's what you think of what my suggestions usually are. But she was like, I had no idea. I'm so excited. So
I'm not a complete novice to the series, because I've done a lot of research for work, and I made like a couple of quizzes that are like, are you going to be the diamond of the season? Like I know who Lady Whistledown is. I know all that stuff. I'm not completely new. So I did know, like, I think the only thing that would be confusing is like who Violet is, but I knew who that was. When I first started watching the show, the first like 2 or 3 episodes, I was like judging you. I was like, this sucks.
yeah.
And I really didn't like it. And I was like, cool. Because I gave up my no streaming service ban for this.
We crossed the picket line for Bridgerton.
So I don't think it's like I didn't like it, but it was more like, because I think I told you I was always only going to watch the first episode. Yeah. Is that feeling where it's like, if I never watch another episode again, I think I'll be fine.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
That was like the feeling. I struggled getting into it because it is that kind of show where it's like, it's towing the line between being historically accurate and not historically accurate. And I kind of wish it just leaned one way or the other. It has, all the royal outfits, and it's like some of the history is accurate. but then you have like a instrumental version of Halo in the background. So it's like, I don't understand. And I guess like it's hard to be accurate when you're also including your own original characters, like in the Bridgertons and all that. It can't be necessarily historically accurate, but I kind of wish that like it would go one way or the other. Because I also really like The Great. And I think that does a really good job of like, it's not historically accurate and it also doesn't try to be.
Yeah, Bridgerton definitely has an interesting fusion.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, the actual main series, Bridgerton, I guess it doesn't like have that same problem that this does, since to my knowledge, I think those are all fictional characters within like this different imagining of the Regency period of
Yeah.
England.
Because I think
But
it's like it's using some real characters and some real history, but this one was much more history focused because it's much more
yeah.
focused on like a historical character. And I've been in very like history mode. I majored in American studies, so this isn't I'm on a certain side of the war. But there are some things like Queen Charlotte spoke no English when she married George
Mhm.
the Third, and she only spoke in a German accent. So there's all of that kind of stuff that they're taking liberty with. They didn't live at Buckingham House until like a year into the marriage, and I think the mental health incidents kind of didn't start into a few years into the marriage.
Mhm.
So there was some stuff that was just like, we're speeding up the timeline here.
I am not an American Studies major, and I had a public school education. And I'm not like, there are people that like love I mean, even if they don't love the British royalty, like they're obsessed with the monarch and love the history of it. I am not one of those people. So it was a surprise to me that George was insane. I was like, whoa, this came out of nowhere for me.
You've never heard of Mad King George?
No,
Interesting.
what's up with this guy? I was like, what's his deal? I have a vague sense of British royal history.
Well, it's
You know,
kind of like I think Game of Thrones takes a lot from like the real British monarchy stories. That's why they have like the Mad King that's Daenerys's
dad, I think,
grandfather, father.
or
Yeah.
yeah,
I don't know.
but yeah, so this is like a surprise to me. And I mean, something interesting that Bridgerton, like the main series does, is that Shonda Rhimes is the writer for this, or showrunner for this series,
Slowly
who
taking over the world.
literally so prolific, has written like every friggin' series that's out there.
My favorite is maybe Princess Diaries 2.
Oh, did she write that?
Yeah.
Amazing. Shonda Rhimes, and something that they're doing with the original series is this like fusion of, like you said, the historical inaccuracies and this kind of fictional, I would say a fictional like reimagining of the time period. And like a key component of that in the main series is like different races playing these different parts, and like predominantly like Black characters being able to have like these titles that they wouldn't have had at the time, these positions of power. And something that's interesting is that in the original Bridgerton, at least to my like knowledge, I haven't watched it back since it first came out. I just watched each season through once. The racial like differences are not acknowledged at all. It's just like part of the history, that we have these like Black actors and like Indian actors for Kate and Anthony's series. And then in this one though, they like bring it back as like a focus of the narrative, like very much so. I mean, it's the exploration of Queen Charlotte and her beginnings, but they also now are like tying it in. So it's interesting to see how they like narratively reckon with that reimagining, and then like the literal reimagining of what the history of like segregation in England is, and how they see it
Yeah.
playing out with with her being the first Black queen, and talking about like, oh, I thought she was Moorish. Like her skin's a lot darker, and then like them having to like reckon with all of the things that comes from that.
Yeah,
And
there's
then
some historical basis. I think especially when Meghan Markle came up in like the British monarchy, there were like a bunch of stuff was Queen Charlotte the first Black queen of England and stuff,
Mhm.
which is interesting. It's still not really known if she actually had African ancestry. I liked what they did with it, so I don't really care about that element. I think the first episode of Queen Charlotte is dedicated to someone, and I always really like dedications in shows.
Yeah, I Googled that too because I was like, who? And it's like Netflix's CEO's, his wife, it's her mother. It's like, so it's
Mm-hmm.
Netflix's CEO's mother-in-law who passed away, who had like an insane obsession with Queen Charlotte and really wanted to tell her story. And she, I think, went to him and like begged him, like, please include this, because since Queen Charlotte's a part of the Bridgerton tale, she was like, please do an in-depth look at this. And then I think, unfortunately, she passed away, I think, before the
Mm-hmm.
show was
But we
finished.
love a her story moment.
Like, instead of history, like her story.
Her story.
Yeah. Love it. But yeah, I had like a similar situation as you did where I thought the first couple episodes were hard to get into. But once you like see the full arc, I thought it was like a really beautiful, beautiful little mini series here.
Because it's
Um,
also like there's some things where you don't fully understand the significance of it, like the dog and stuff, until you see that full arc. So I was like, I'm glad I gave it like a full shot and watched the whole thing rather than watching like the first episode, because I think I would have come on here and been like, Brooke, what the fuck?
Yeah, that's why I was like, okay, like first episode is fine because it's like a big time commitment because they're like hefty episodes. Each of them's like at minimum kind of like an hour, somewhere like an hour and a half. But I was like, yeah, she watched the whole thing.
The beginning of it reminded me a lot of Game of Thrones with like the evil brother selling off his sister. But I was like, it's gonna be so tame that he's not gonna die in like melted gold. So I think that was also where I was coming from, where it was like, it's not gonna be as gory as I would like. Because it's like
Like you wanted that.
it has some of the sex of Game of Thrones, but not really the gory, and the sex is kind of like downplayed. So I was like, I liked it, but I
Mhm.
was like, it's Kids Bop Game of Thrones.
You're waiting for that like HBO rating.
Yeah.
You're like, give it to me. I want to see the hearts being ripped out. Have you like recently started watching Game of Thrones again, or
No, but that's
oh
just
okay,
like
it's
what I
just on.
really remember is watching that first episode, and Danny's creepy brother is like selling her off.
Mhm.
And he's like studying her naked. I don't know, that really stayed with me.
Yeah. I mean, thankfully he doesn't do that in this, but
Yeah,
yeah,
I don't
they're
like that guy. And that guy's from Nancy Drew. So I was like trying to wrap
yeah.
my head around that.
You said something a couple minutes ago where it's like you have all these, it's definitely a series that's playing off of like time and how we have a lot of flashbacks where we get to see one person's perspective and then we go back and things start to make more sense when we can see the other person's. And then a lot of things kind of click in place too for the Bridgerton series as well. Mostly of like what I'm seeing on my TikTok is people going back through Bridgerton season 1 and 2, and there are like maybe a handful, like maybe like 5 scenes of Queen Charlotte in the present time with King George, and those are like make much more sense now knowing their whole like little backstory together.
Is
And
Brimsley
everyone's,
always there?
I think he is. I'm not positive, but I was just looking at like screenshots of Bridgerton season 1, trying to nail down the wigs that she has. And he was in
And
like
then nail it into your head.
literally, it's becoming more and more painful by the second. But I did see him in a like at least one screenshot, so I think yes, but I can't be positive. But
Interesting. I think I was also struggling with knowing that George III is who he is, and I like knowing about the American Revolution, knowing about this guy. And so like and when they're talking in the garden and he's like charming, that was like a really tough pill for me to swallow.
you want to give like a brief history lesson because I know next to nothing about what he did to the to the Americas.
Well, it was basically he's the one that they wrote the whole Declaration of Independence to. Like he was the one that taxed them without giving them representation in parliament. He was known as the Mad King because of these kinds of episodes. He started having fits, and Queen Charlotte was like afraid to go near him because apparently he would like hold on to people and not let go.
Mhm.
And then she stopped seeing him after like around like 1812 or something. And then she actually died a year before him, but he was so kind of out of his mind at that point that he didn't even know, and then he died a year later. There's traces of arsenic in his hair that people have been able to see. So they're unsure if it was his clothes or his makeup that was doing this, or if it was some kind of brain kind of genetic thing. Because the thing with history that's hard is like it's hard to diagnose people after the fact. And that's like something that historians never are allowed to do. You're not allowed to. But a lot of people say that there is some sort of kind of sense of bipolar as well. But he was just like a kind of a complicated dude. But he was born 2 months premature as well. So maybe the boy just wasn't cooked right. I don't know.
Send him back in.
Yeah. I don't know. I tried to picture him as like Jonathan Groff in Hamilton. That's kind of like how I kept trying to ground myself, because I'm like, I live in DC. The Declaration of Independence is just a little ways. Like, I feel dirty watching this.
You're like, if these colors don't run, baby. Red, white, and blue.
But he was for abolition. And so he's like kind of a complicated dude, because a lot of people actually really liked him in the time. And he was actually like a pretty successful king before we go into the Regency period, which is called that because of his son had to take over as the regent. The Regency period is where Jane Austen lived, and all of her stories are set.
Yeah, I was Googling that too, because I was like, where does my Pride and Prejudice fall into this? But yeah, I think I Googled like the same thing about like what was his like actual diagnosis. And I think people like looking back at it with the arsenic thing, they call it like, it's called like, what is it? It's something like polyphoria.
Yeah, it starts with a P. Yeah.
Or it's something like called like a buildup of toxins was their best guess, along with a possible bipolar diagnosis. But I know you're like very pro America when it comes to George, but does historical fact kind of show him having like a lot more like agency in these decisions against like America and everything? Because in from just my perspective from the show, it seems like, he's this like young kid, I guess. His dad dies very early on in his life, I think like at birth or not far after it, and then he is made to marry someone that he doesn't know, and then he kind of has these fits right away and is kind of deemed mentally unstable almost immediately, beginning at his like coronation and everything. And from that perspective, the show very much is like showing that he kind of isn't in charge of making these decisions, which like I guess is kind of the whole thing of like the British royal crown is not like one person or two people that are on the throne. It's an entire like network of people that are making these decisions and scheming and everything. But is he like actually in charge of these decisions against America and all these like bad things, or was it like everyone around him and he was just like cuckoo in the corner?
Well, I watched 7 minutes of history, a video documentary on, was the Mad King George really mad? And they said that the madness was actually like smaller periods of time. So for most of his ruling, he actually was aware until the point where he gave up his crown for his son to take over as regency. So actually he was, I think he's less mad than people think. Yeah, so he was there. He fought a lot with Parliament. He was very like involved until that moment where he gave up the crown.
Sorry, this is like a history grill, but do you know how far into his reign that he had to give up the crown for the regency?
I'm reading now. But basically he did oppose like the bid for American independence, but he did not develop the policies that they were really against, like the Stamp Act and stuff like that. So he's not necessarily fully responsible for that, but he did like fund the war and stuff, and he would not give up on America. And it was just like, yeah, girl, he's just not into you. Like,
he's like an ex-girlfriend that you won't stop following on Instagram.
Yeah. He started having serious bouts of illness in 1788 to 89. So for context, he reigned starting in 1760. So he didn't really like start going fully mad until like 30 years or whatever into his reign. He became permanently deranged in 1810. Yeah. Okay, so like he actually had like a fair amount of years. He was actually, I think, the longest monarch.
Oh, really?
For a while. Yeah. At least the longest male monarch for a while. So So George IV then acted as Prince Regent from 1811.
Okay, interesting. Okay, quick little history lesson for
Yeah.
everyone.
And he started the whole thing where it was like one of the big things he did was like royal finances. That was like it's very I don't know if you watch The Crown, but it's a big thing that like the queen deserves like an allowance and stuff and able to like fund her own home and stuff, and he did all that stuff too. So
Good.
I mean, not for the British people, but
Oh, they're like taxing the shit out of them for the money, or
yeah, he's like, I want multiple houses for me and my wife.
oh,
But he never took a mistress.
here we
That's
go. He
something
didn't
that a
have
lot of people
time.
really like about him is that he never took a mistress. I don't actually know if the whole like Venus thing is true.
He was really into astrology.
But like he really like did read all government papers that were presented to him, and a lot of his fights with Parliament were because he actually was involved in policy making and he wouldn't just let them do shit. So like he
Okay.
was very much involved in all of this kind of stuff. So, and he was actually known as Farmer George.
Oh, was he?
Mm-hmm.
Was that like part of his like psychosis, or did they just like work that in and he
I
just
don't
really
know, but he took a keen
sounds
interest in
that?
agriculture, particularly on the Crown estates at Richmond and Windsor, and he went as Farmer George. Okay, so let's go back to the series.
Yeah, so that's our little historical snippet just based on let's just like go just based on now the series as it's presented. I could talk real quick about my least favorite moments, which were probably all of the present day scenes. Like if I were to make a serious remake, I'd be like, cut them out. Like cut them out except for this
I thought they weren't good just because I didn't really understand or care about these characters, so that's
I
actually good to hear.
yeah, I did understand and care about these characters, and I was like, what the fuck? I was like, why are we going on these tangents? And
I'm
then
like, cool, Violet wants her garden
some of
tended.
them were so yeah, so basically all of the present day scenes that are not about I like we can keep all of the ones of the queen and her kids and like basically life is coming full circle for her and she is now doing what George's mom kind of did to her and she's kind of stepped into this queen role that divorces her from her like familial mother role, which I understand. I thought they like did a really good job of demonstrating that for them it was Charlotte and Farmer George like against the world. And
Mhm.
I guess we can talk about like the likability of Queen Charlotte as a person. I don't know that I would say that she's like a good person because of all of these like character flaws, but I would say that she is a good wife to George and she is a
Mhm.
good queen, which is like the same criticisms that her own children. How many did she have? Like 13 of them? Her own
15, I think.
Oh, okay, 15 births, 13 live children
I
or
don't
something.
even know.
Okay,
Yeah.
we're
She lost a couple, yeah. I
we'll
think
say
she lost like 3
13.
or something, 2 or 3.
Okay, we'll say like 12 maybe living children to maybe 15 births.
Yeah, she has a good ratio.
She's a range there, but that's like the same criticisms that they launch at her too, where like her son's wife has just died in childbirth and she's so preoccupied with maintaining the line, but like from her perspective, her entire world and job as a woman in that time period was to be the queen, so to be this man. Like her job is to be a good wife to George and then to reproduce and make sure that this line continues on. But anyway, so I think we're like good to go to keep all of those present day scenes. I think those are really important for showing her character arc throughout, the last 40 years or however long the time period is. But all of the scenes, which were like quite a few between Violet Bridgerton, which is the mom of all the Bridgerton kids that the main series focuses on, and then Agatha Danbury, Lady Danbury, is so fucking weird. I was like, what are we doing? I think like, I'll come back in like 40 years and rewatch this as like a woman like newly entering menopause. But as it stands as a fertile young woman, I was like, this is weird.
It made me wonder who this show is for, because I
Mhm.
think that was important for like representation and like
Yeah.
old women still want to fuck. Like that's a great
Yeah.
message, but I'm like, I thought this was like a teen show. That's where I was like, huh, interesting that they're
Well,
using this platform to talk about it.
yeah, so I was interested in that too, because like when my mom had said like, "Oh, I just finished Bridgerton," I was shocked because I didn't see that as being in her demographic. But now I'm like, now I gotta like pull up Netflix's stats and see like what age range this is. I would assume it's mostly women watching this show, but I was like, I wonder if it skews more towards the older ladies because they were like really like throwing them a bone. It was, like at its essence I liked the message of like older women can still be sexual beings. It was kind of giving back sexual agency and the idea that like women can have pleasure from sex, like back to them, which is not something that like would be common in that time period where we see like with Lady Danbury and her husband, sex is like a transaction that she must endure rather than like something that she can take pleasure in until she finds a partner that she can do that with. So like at its essence, I'm like, hell yeah, women can fuck. But at its like presentation, I was like, this is uncomfortable because they were like, not only can women fuck, but they'll fuck your dads. And I was like, that's weird. I was like, why did we have to include that little tidbit? And the way that they made Violet Bridgerton so horny. Girl was on like the edge of her seat. If she went on like one bumpy carriage ride, she would have orgasmed. Like she was like fanning herself. She was like, I can't even look at these paintings that have like boobs on them.
That was their porn.
I was like, okay.
They don't have access to Pornhub. They have
like
art.
And I was like, do they get to like request specific like art pictures? Do they have little fantasies? What are they whipping up? Like at one point, they were like getting real close to each other and were like talking about their female pleasure. I was like, are we gonna have like a little lesbian?
That's what I was like. I was like, kiss, kiss, kiss.
I know. And I was like, if they did that, I would have been like, yes. Like, this is amazing. But instead, they were like, I too have flowered my garden, and it was with your father. That was the one and only time I had a climax. But yeah, so I thought that was really weird. And then I didn't like at the end, she like gets out her dad. Violet Bridgerton's dad always made these like birthday party hats for people. And
did anyone want them? Like, they're kind of shitty.
Wanted one.
No, but I was just like, is anyone asking for these? Or I thought originally I couldn't tell what he was making them out of. I thought it was macaroni. I thought he was it's like dad's doing arts and crafts.
Dad made another macaroni necklace. I have to put it on the fridge.
And I was like, Jesus, dad has no game.
No, he had game. I will dispute that. I was all ready for it. I was like, yes, Lord Ledger. But yeah, she like discovers the party hat, and then they have this like what's supposed to be like the big moment for this realization for Agatha and for Violet, who are friends. And she puts out all the party hats in her room, and she's like giving her a little wink, wink, nod, nod, like, I know what you did, my dad. She's just like, yes, I like these party hats. Like it's an unmentioned, but we all are on the same page kind of thing. But yeah, anyways, that's like my biggest criticism. And then I think the first couple episodes start out slowly, and for like if you're like an imbecile uneducated person like I am and had no idea who King George or Queen Charlotte were, when we're like watching these first episodes, I'm like, what's this guy's deal? I was like, God, this is such an unlikable character. I was like, why? I was like, where are we going with this? Oh my God, which I think was like part of my frustration. I was like, this guy's all over the place. He is so scattered. I'm not understanding anything that's happening. I was like, why would they write a guy like this? Like, this is so awful. And then I like Googled, and it was like Mad King George, and I was like, oh, it's like this guy has a bit of a reputation. And then the pieces started to fall in place.
Yeah, again, I think what really drove me crazy is the popular music and like violins. I don't know, that just like takes me so out of the world. I don't know why.
I don't mind that at all.
I hate that.
I think Bridgerton does a better job of making those classical renditions of popular music more of like bops. Like I didn't really notice.
Like, why are we doing that? Like Like, if you're gonna fuse in modern with like old school, like have Queen Charlotte come out in a crop top. Like, why are we being wishy-washy with some things? Like, commit to the bit.
I
Was my
don't
issue.
know. I
But
like it. You're a hater. I like it.
but I left the first episode with the sole thought, I hope they're playing Julie Andrews really well.
For her like one line as
Yeah.
Lady Whistledown.
Some parts that I really liked, I was like, ugh, why does the king that I should hate the most have the most in common with me? Like, I'm also anxious. I'm also a mentally ill baddie.
Like
Um,
I'm no stranger to panic attacks. Representation king.
exactly.
I will say my favorite characters of this whole series were obviously Brimsley and Reynolds.
I know, Team
My
Butler.
boys, my little babies, I love them so much. Brimsley is adorable and I love his character. They were just like such ride or dies. I was like, I
I
know that they
know.
are maybe paid. I don't know what their payment situation is for their jobs. Like, I know they're
Probably
paid
not much.
I know they're like basically like non-paid but still employees, but like what ride or die, like especially Reynolds. Like I just love seeing two characters that obviously, well, first of all, yay, we love the gay representation, but um secondly, like there's two characters who are, devoted to each other, but I love seeing those romances where it's like I love you, but like I love my job more. And like they're
I
definitely
know. Brimsley was like a 20-something girl in New York getting a
yeah,
job at at a magazine.
publishing house, yeah. He was like, "Listen, babe, I'm not interested in anything serious because I will put my job first." But I thought it was such like an interesting twist on that because there are these two characters who are so devoted to their jobs, but their jobs are people, like they're so devoted to these other people in their lives that like truly I think you could say like the king and the queen are like the true love of their life, not in the sense like romantically, but in the sense of their like devotion. And I think it's so cool to see them both being so just like their sense of like duty to each of these characters and what they'll do for them, but their sense of like, love for each other. But Reynolds is just like a ride or die. His king is getting friggin' tortured and back, and he's like, nothing to see here. Like my
But then
orders
I
were
really liked when Reynolds tried to fight for
yeah.
him, and
Yeah.
I thought I was really scared when he got like hit back and shoved back into the wall. I thought he
Yeah.
was gonna die, but then I remember, okay, this is Kids Bop Game of Thrones. Nothing's
Yeah,
gonna happen to him.
if this were Game of Thrones, they would have like disemboweled him,
Mm-hmm.
like used his innards to strangle the king and torture. But no, I love their story so much. And then obviously like the big, like honestly, I mean the king and queen story, yeah, that's beautiful too. But the freaking heartbreak of the transition scene between them dancing, because like even though in this fictional reimagining of this time in England, like we have, this acceptance of people of color having these titles and given land and all this stuff, even though that's been like reimagined to be like quote unquote acceptable and segregation is being talked about, they still, I guess, being gay is still not acceptable in this reimagining, which is also interesting. I'm sure we could do a deeper analysis of that. But their relationship is very much hidden. And we see them dancing by themselves, like in the corner. And then it transitions in that like last episode of Brimsley, like 40 years later, however long it is. And he's dancing alone, and Reynolds is nowhere to be found. So I'm like, you better freaking tell me, like, what happened to Reynolds? Like, where is he? Unfortunately, I feel like a lot of like LGBTQ plus or queer stories like are sad. Like they make them go through a lot of trauma, which I think is like a general criticism that people launch, that there aren't a lot of happy like gay stories. But I was like,
Violet and Lady Danbury, we were hoping for you.
what we could have had, that may be some queer baiting, but I could very much see like, okay, did Reynolds die? Or like if they do somehow bring this like cast of characters back, is it a situation where like in this historical reimagining, it seems like gay is still not okay. It has to be hidden. Like, is it a situation where Reynolds like kind of moved on with his life and then like decided to like get a wife, get a kids, like have like a family, and Brimsley wasn't up to doing that or wanted to stay with his queen and didn't want to pursue that path. So
Well,
I'm
that's
like,
kind of
oh
what
god.
he alludes to, is like, I couldn't find anyone else who's willing to
Yeah.
have a life with me when I'm committed to you. I don't know.
Yeah.
I kind of had the feeling as well that it's like, obviously the queen and king go their separate ways eventually. And if we're following history, they just kind of stopped seeing each other completely
Mhm.
in the 1800s. And so like there's that moment where they're like, this could be our life together since our king and queen are together. And
Mhm.
then once they kind of go their separate ways, both Brimsley and Reynolds go their separate ways. I will say, I know we have an actual king in the story, but Brimsley is my short king.
Oh my god, he's adorable. I love the height difference between them. I loved those characters so much. I was so happy to see them. Oh, I guess we can like touch really quick on like quote unquote doctor or the early stages of a psychiatrist, I guess. As someone who works in the mental health field, I was like, giving us a bad rap. Like, I don't
My
know.
therapist has never done this.
Yeah, personally, this is not what we do in the psychiatrist's office. If you do have this being done to you, you should call 911, because that's not a psychiatrist, that is a serial killer, and you should not be paying them.
I was
Um,
like shouting at him because he's like, your nervous fits are because you are used to splendor and your inability to obey. And I was like, my nervous little stints are because I'm scared of everything.
you're like, I
I
just
don't have splendor. I
have a
currently have a roach infestation and I'm
Oh
still
no.
scared.
Oh, one of my favorite bits of that is, as someone who owns bunnies, he gave the little Pomeranian as a gift, which is like a tie into the future. Like, she's always had little Pomeranians now walking around with her, but she calls it like a deformed bunny. And I was like, yes, we saved the animal from like the depths of the lab. Like, no more animal testing. But yeah, what an interesting look into like the history of the mental health field, which, I mean, I have a psychology degree. I don't know the entire accuracy of that depiction, but in general, they were doing some weird shit for quite a long time.
Well,
They were
I could imagine um because it was also like I would imagine they would also go to like demonic possession or something, because there was also like all of that talk about how Lady Danbury needed a strong man to take care of her, like the Salem witch trials, even though we're getting into like America, is like was because females, it was like kind of a way to keep females from economic prosperity. So that was
Mhm.
definitely like still alive and well, of like, if you like twitch, there's a demon around.
Yeah, I mean, for like the treatment for quote unquote hysterical women or hysteria, do you know what it was?
I don't know.
They would give them orgasms. I like took the history of like sexuality course in college, and the literal treatment for hysterical women, so women's exhibiting hysteria, like fainting all the time or just like talking crazy and all this stuff, the doctors would literally administer an orgasm.
So like
And
rape is the answer?
that,
That's
like,
uncomfortable.
yeah, I it wasn't like rape. They were not, well, I mean, like, yes, probably in like a textbook definition, but the women would go to the doctor and it would be considered like a medical procedure. They weren't like using their own penises, they were using like medical devices. Essentially kind of like old-timey vibrators for
Mm.
clitoral stimulation. But yeah, the field of psychiatry and psychology in terms of like the history of medicine is a very new branch, that as recently as the 1950s, like they've really changed a lot in
That's
the
really
last.
interesting, because I know even like in Jane Austen's time, Sense and Sensibility is basically like you're supposed to be able to give pleasure, but you're not supposed to receive pleasure. Like women are not supposed to enjoy sexual acts. So that's interesting.
But with like the hysteria thing, I don't even know if they considered it to like be a pleasure from a sexual act. They just thought that the hysteria was caused by, something that's like always in these old medical things is like a buildup of the vapors. They thought it was caused by like a buildup of the female fluids running around.
Imagine going to a CVS and like passing over like a prescription script and they're like, gotta orgasm you.
They're like, all right, come on back. I have a little bit of time here.
They use one of those curtains or like the little dividers, like when you get a flu shot.
Yeah. They're like, Betsy, come on back twice this week, huh? And she's like, yep, I got a 90-day script. But yeah, it's a relatively new field, and boy, were they just doing some inhumane things.
I did note, and we've talked about this before on the show, is that part where the doctor is like looking at Queen Charlotte to see if she's like actually pregnant. They literally have, I mean, even then, they're riding carriages. They don't have cars. They don't have most things, but it's the same fucking speculum that we have today.
Yeah. Yep. Looks like a torture device. We still use it.
We still use it.
Yeah, mental health and women's health are not something that the white male patriarchy invests in learning about. And if you like go down a rabbit hole of looking at this stuff, it is astonishing today the amount of medications that are just not tested on women, and especially not tested in pregnant women, which, there's like an ethical dilemma with pregnant women if they can do medication trials, but not testing on half of the population with women in general means that we don't know how these medications work on women, and they probably don't work exactly the same as they work on men. Women's health has a long way to go. And I think at least for, psychiatry and psychology, there's been, unfortunately with COVID, a lot more mental health issues have come about, but at least it's definitely advancing the field and what we're going to be paid to be able to do research on and stuff like that.
Yeah. I think if we have to be speculumed, I don't know if that's a word, but then they should do the original treatment that was given to King George for men, which is leeches on the eyeballs.
Leeches on the balls.
That was his actual treatment, is that they would put leeches straight onto his eyes.
My gosh.
So.
It's so crazy. Did they ever like just stop and think? They were like, hey, do we think like any sane person having these treatment done would have like maybe the same results as poor George here, who, started out mad, but you're putting leeches on my balls. I'm getting pretty pissed off real quick. Like, I am also delving very quickly into insanity just to deal with that. I would say like overarching, Brimsley and Reynolds are my favorite. And then obviously Bridgerton at its core is like romance stories. And, I think this is honestly the most interesting story that they've told so far in their, if we consider this kind of a third season of romance. The other love stories have their troubles, and like Kate and Anthony is like forbidden romance, like falling in love with your sister's lover.
I thought we were going to stop in a different place in that sentence.
Forbidden romance, falling in love with your sister.
Game of Thrones again.
Game of Thrones.
If it wasn't the Kids Bop Game of Thrones, they would have gone with the sister.
They would have, they would have been like, who are we marrying? Obviously, cousin Greg, like easy choice.
But I will say, like that moment where he like threatens the Archbishop of Canterbury when she's giving birth, and that moment when like she's like being breached or whatever, and
being breached.
Well, the baby is coming out the wrong way.
Breach, yeah.
The baby, there we go.
Being breached sounds like she's being like her land is. Her moat is being crossed and the defenses have fallen. There's a breach in security.
But when he was like, I read about this other way to get a baby out, and he was like, I love new science. That was so hot.
You're like, say that again. Soon to be daddy. You're like, you've seen a horse give birth? First of all, if I was mid-labor and my husband compared me to a horse or a cow's delivery, I'd be like, that's it, get him out, get this piece of shit out. I was like, oh, I'm sorry, I remind you of a horse right now. Death. But
he's Farmer George. He's working with what he has.
I know his knowledge base is not not without fault, but
and then the final scene where like he kind of comes back and they've always kind of been in love, that was really nice. I did write at the end, it's a shame that I'm mad but not royal, because I think I would be really good as a mad queen.
You're like, what do I do with all this anxiety medication? It's not even being used.
I know. I was like, do you want some like Prozac?
I got a little antipsychotic here for you. I was gonna say, so the first season of Bridgerton is like all of these loves are complicated in some way. In the first season of Bridgerton, we see like a bit of a forbidden love kind of thing. And then Daphne and the Duke get together. And then they have like, trust issues and him lying, themes of not wanting to become your father and, trying to be better than your parents were, all this kind of stuff. Kate and Anthony is the forbidden love. And then finally seeing that realized, like moving past like your duty to like accepting that you could actually have like a happy life with someone. But this love story, I loved it so much because I think it is much more real, and like at its essence it seems it's an absolute tragedy, right? Like on Charlotte's part, she's essentially sold off. She has no decision making at all. She even is like delusional to the point of thinking that her brother, when she writes to her brother to come save her, I think Charlotte's very young, she's like naive in a lot of these things, right? So Lady Danbury is the one that has to be like, girly pop, like I know you're like 17 and you're literally like just concerned, because it comes off of like Charlotte gets married and she's like, does my husband not like me? She's like, is it something that I said? And Lady Danbury is like, that's fine. But can we talk about like segregation, getting titles for like people of color? Also, like, you need to ensure your bloodline. She's like, I know that these things don't seem as serious to you, but like, you are the voice of all of us and you have been given this power and you're not using it. So she has these much more adult view of things. Even though she's maybe only like 5 years older than her, she's seen a lot more, and Charlotte doesn't quite realize the power that she has. But, at its essence, it's a very naive and tragic story for Charlotte, like writing to her brother, thinking that she has the option to kind of leave this situation. She's like, oh, well, like the king is nuts. He's not even talking to me. Like the queen is making all these demands. She keeps saying like racist things towards me, which connection to Game of Thrones, shout out to Lady Stark being the queen. I saw someone tweet like, I got real nervous when I saw this lady at a wedding again. They were like, what's going to happen? But, she writes to her brother and she kind of has that naivete to think that she has an option to leave. She doesn't realize quite how like limited her options are. Even as the Queen of England, she is first and foremost a woman in this time period, which comes with, much less power than she thinks she has. But, their love story at its essence could be viewed very tragically. She's whisked away. She's sold off to this man who is, essentially mentally not all there and could have the potential for being very dangerous for her. Like she doesn't quite know. But it's so beautiful to see a story about someone who is mentally ill, like at its essence, it may have been because
representation for me.
It's hope. But even if it was a buildup of toxins, we don't quite know what it is, but regardless, it's seen as, a mental disability, a mental illness. And we see someone who loves him despite all of that, and despite not even needing to love him is the thing. Like, everyone is telling her like, this could be a one and done sitch for you, girl. They're like, you did it, you produced an heir, get on out of here, go and like eat your little cakes, wear your big wigs, like you only have to see him once a year for like an annual bedding. But she like loves him not despite his mental illness, but she loves like him in his entirety. And it's such a beautiful story of how they both feel utterly alone. King George, because of his mental illness, because he doesn't feel safe inside his own mind, but also because he has been brought up to do one singular thing and he feels very trapped in his role as the king. And then Charlotte also being completely trapped in a foreign country with no family, no ties. As the queen, she's not even allowed to really have that many close friends around her. And they both are each other's like literal anchor to the world. And then that line that's like plastered over like every little Netflix or TikTok little snippet is like, I will stand with you, because he's like, you can't love me, and he's trying to distance himself from her, and she's like, no, you love me and I know it. And like he's like, I do love you, and she's like, I will stand with you like between earth and the heavens and like tell you where you are. And I'm like, oh my god, because that's like that's all any of us want, right? Is for someone to like know all of our flaws and still want to be with us. It's so beautiful.
Are you okay?
Yeah, it's just
I
so
think to
good.
me it kind of felt a little bit notebook like. I mean, not the scenario in which they get together, obviously, but like in that ending moment where they're underneath the bed and like despite all of the kind of madness and her inability to stay with him, he kind of like comes back to her in the end.
Yeah.
So it was very Nicholas Sparks at the end.
Yeah. I mean, and because that is something that, you know, if we're thinking about this, is this skewed towards an older audience? Is this the older Bridgerton viewers thing? Because that's something that a lot of people in their marriages, you know, they kind of have all of the stuff that's explored in the other Bridgerton series of trust issues and navigating, you know, what parenting is going to look like, what planning your future is. And I feel like a lot of older couples don't encounter something like dementia. Like, you know, it's kind of like a form of dementia or Alzheimer's or anything, you know, where your partner who you loved is no longer there fully. And that's something that a lot of people are fortunate enough to not experience until 70 years into their marriage when they're both in their old age. But it's something that they have had to navigate since day one of their marriage. And you can see the like trust that they've built over that time. Yeah. Do we want to jump into our remakes real quick?
Yeah, there was no Who's Your Daddy for this one, so good job.
Good job, Netflix. Yeah, I like immediately followed like a bunch of the actors on Instagram.
Did they follow you back?
They did, yeah. They followed Remake Hot Take. They're gonna be on the show next week. One of my remakes here is that I know you didn't love like the mix of fiction and historical inaccuracies. But I say that we, you know, you wanted them to like pick a side. I say we lean fully into that aspect. And my remake is keep everything exactly as it was, maybe get rid of some of the present day scenes with Lady Danbury and Violet Bridgerton, but keep everything the same, but we have an adjustable bed frame for
in her head
for King George, because it seems like they're going under there quite frequently. So I think, you know, I'm just foreseeing some future issues here. She has like a 15-pound wig on her head. It's quite voluptuous here.
Is that cushion for her? Is it like a helmet?
It's a built-in pillow, essentially. Yeah. But you know, they're both getting a little old. I think we install that adjustable bed frame as early as possible, and then, you know, they just do, and it comes up, and then they can slide right under there with ease, because, you know, they don't have to get on the floor and roll. They can just kind of scooch under there, and then they're good to go.
I was imagining like you know, one of those things that they have as like a car mechanic. Like one of those little rolly things. Yeah. And they're like, she's like, Brimsley, lay me.
Brimsley, I'm ready.
Wheel me.
Wheel me on my little skateboard under. But yeah, I think we like fully lean into it and embrace modernity there. Another kind of workaround there is that you know, he's obsessed with the heavens and the stars and with Venus and looking at all these, you know, things through his telescope. I think he seems to be kind of like bedroom ridden for the later part of his years. I think we can kind of meet him where he's at, and we also lean into modern features and get some of those like stick up glow in the dark stars for him. And I think
King George definitely knows everyone's zodiac sign, their rising, all of that. The
He's
moon
like,
sign of everyone in court.
he's like, I'm so glad you did not go over the wall because one, look at you, babe, and I knew that you were a Virgo moon and a Scorpio rising. I knew we were gonna get along.
They're like, oh, the Russian ambassador is here, and he's like, that's a Pisces.
That's a
No.
Pisces if I've ever seen one. Oh my God. He's like, sorry, I can't talk to Parliament today. I'm feeling very Libra at the moment. I just don't
Mercury's
know.
in retrograde.
Yeah, that's his excuse when Parliament's like, hey, how come you like keep having these fits and like can't come and do your job? And he's like, bitch, I don't know what to tell you. Like Mercury in retrograde, this is not my fault. There's an unaspected planet in my in my vision here. But yeah, I think we get the little glow in the dark light up little stars for him. He can like putz around his room all day, just pointing at him, looking at him. I think that's a much safer environment for him. He's not like running out to the yard, like naked as hell, looking up at the stars. He's just like naked, running around his room, looking up in his little glow in the dark constellation. So I think that's a much safer environment.
Because I think when he's running outside naked, it's a cry for help. When he's running around naked in his room, that's just a hobby, you know?
That's just a Tuesday. Like that's totally fine. And then my last one is that I think we have like a kind of like a cut scene, like a Marvel after credits sort of scene. And it's, you know, his ramblings on the wall. And then like someone goes up to it, maybe Brimsley or something. And it's all his markings on the wall. And they look at it and it's actually like the cure for cancer or something extremely remarkable. He's like, I'm a man of science. And everyone's like, this guy's batshit crazy. Like, we're not going to do what he says. He's just like, you know, they're like, we just want to use the leeches. We just want to do our like bloodletting. We're going to keep doing what we're doing. But actually go up to the board and like you like read the fine print of his little ramblings on there. And it's like the cure for cancer or like, I don't know, like the plans for a Tesla, like something extremely modern and very complex. And then Elon Musk would be out of a job.
You know what's crazy? They didn't pay attention to his ramblings, and it was actually the plan for a female-friendly speculum.
Yeah, he was like, I don't like this for my wife. I think there should be something else.
This is what they use on horses.
Women deserve more rights.
Because we have, you know, some kind of crossover with Hamilton. So what if we turned Bridgerton into a musical?
Didn't someone do Bridgerton the musical and then
there's the joke.
Oh, okay. I only knew like enough about it. Didn't they like try to do it and then they like copyrighted the shit out of them? They were like,
no, they did, and then I think I don't know if they're still being sued, but they were being sued for a while because it was basically fine, but then they started selling tickets to it, and that's when they were like, they just flew too close to the sun because they won a Tony, like Go Home, or I think they won a Tony.
Did they?
I think so.
You achieved your goal. You do not need money.
In that same vein, I was thinking, just so I'm humbled a little bit, King George should be played by Jonathan Groff, just so that helps me stay grounded in the scenario. And he also only sings his lines on the exact same tune that he sings in Hamilton. And he's the only character who does this. No one else comments on it. And then Lin-Manuel Miranda is in the background of every scene as well. Doesn't have any lines, but he's just there. But he wants to, he wants to sing, but he can't.
Oh my
or
God.
like every single time he opens his mouth that we cut to a new scene. So then it's like, everybody's wondering when's Lin gonna get to speak?
Every time it gets cut just short.
Yeah. The other thing is big fan of American history. So we bring it back to the thing in America that's named after Queen Charlotte, which is Charlotte, North Carolina. Obviously he lives in Kew and she lives in the Buckingham house. Mm-hmm. I think he should live in Kew and she should live in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I think getting over that distance will add a little bit more tension.
This is and
she's like, I'm on my honeymoon and I can't even see the NASCAR Hall of Fame. So we just bring in all of these more Charlotte things. I want to see the Charlotte Panthers, but I'm supposed to be in my honeymoon. she's getting served every night, just like barbecue with vinegar in it. So just
She's like,
kind
I
of stuff like
really
that.
love pulled pork, but no one loves it this much. I thought you were gonna say like after the thing that's named after her, Charlotte Russe. I don't even think they exist anymore. Did you ever shop at one? They were like in
No.
malls. It's a store with like lots of like big statement costume jewelry, and
Interesting.
it was kind of like the adult version of like limited to. I think all of them have since disappeared off the face of the earth, as have malls, but
I think
imagine her just waltzing around in there.
this isn't a pitch for this, but I think one of the things that I really loved about Limited 2, if we're just getting into it, is that I remember there was a big crossover between Lizzie McGuire and Limited 2. Like they would like have some kind of the clothes that Lizzie McGuire wore and
Mhm.
stuff. I think there should be a store like that where like you can just buy all the things that characters wear in different shows and they have it in one store.
I like it. Just like every show that exists in the world,
Yeah.
there's like Disney branded. Okay.
Yeah. My final pitch is that I thought that the actress who played young Queen Charlotte did a nice job, but I would like to see a version where Queen Charlotte is played by the band Good Charlotte.
Okay.
And we do it like they
Yeah.
sub out for the main role, kind of like Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen, are subbing out as Michelle in Full House, and it's never commented on why there are a bunch of
They
different
never see.
men
Oh,
playing Queen
yeah.
Charlotte.
I forgot another remake, speaking of like never mentioned, is that I think every time we see her, her hair should get even bigger and more ridiculous and no longer even be wigs, and we don't mention it at any point. So she starts off like, because that sometimes she has like her natural hair too, like kind of like the big like afro for her wedding because she wanted her hair in her wedding dress. And at times like we see her natural hair, and then you see it more in like the present day with these wigs that get like more and more lavish and just out of this world. So I think we do that like every time she gives birth to a child, like her wigs just get more insane.
I
And
just
it's
thought I just can picture the push and then the
like push present. It's not even like her, like it could be her natural hair, but it could also be like she has like, I don't know, like a garden potted plant on her head. She's like, Farmer George, look here, I have wheat growing. Like I have like, I don't know, ficus on my head. And they just get more and more interactive too. I think that would also keep their relationship, in tippy top shape, just like, oh, you never know what she's gonna have up
well,
there.
maybe she just has like an entire shrub, and when he's tending
He
to the
comes
garden,
and
he
he
just gets
trims
kind of cut.
it.
Yeah.
I like that. She's like, well, my husband's really into gardening, so I have like a chia pet sort of hair. It is live. He can come and trim it anytime he wants. A
And
horse
then
escaped.
sometimes the garden's in bloom.
Sometimes it's in bloom. That's every other even day or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, well, did we want to jump into what we've been watching real quick? I watched Pretty Woman the other day, which I was like, Pretty Woman is like a freaking Princess Diaries reunion. I was like, why are there so many of the same like actors in this? And then I Googled it, and I think the director's name is Gary Marshall, and he also directed Princess Diaries. I think he must be like a San Francisco native or something, because San Francisco is featured heavily in that movie too.
But not the best San Francisco movie, because we all know what the best San Francisco movie is.
What is it?
The Room.
Oh, of course. Of course.
Yeah, but that same guy that's like when she lights the guy's jacket or whatever on fire in Princess Diaries, and he says, happens all the time. That's the same guy in Pretty Woman.
Oh, really? Which guy?
The like waiter or something. He plays it in all of them. And then in the second Princess Diaries, when she like flies off her bracelet or something and he catches it, he goes, happens all the time. So he's in both Pretty Woman and all the Princess Diaries movies.
Joe is the concierge hotel manager in Pretty Woman. And then Gary Marshall's daughter is the like Queen's assistant. She is like briefly at the front desk in Pretty Woman. Paolo is also in Pretty Woman. I think he is like runs like a store or something and is like kissing the guy's butt. So I was like, what is the crossover here? I was like, this is insane. They must have been so jazzed to see each other. And then I was like, oh, this is deliberate. This is the same director. I'm currently rewatching the Jumanji remake, Jumanji Welcome to the Jungle, which I personally love. I know that like Dwayne The Rock Johnson is getting some flack for like always taking the same characters and the same kind of movies, because he literally wears like the same outfit across the board. Like I'm sure he like comes up to his costume team and he's like, just do this, like find the same like cargo pants and tight t-shirt.
Well, because like I think he always, he's famous for the cheat day stuff. So he needs to spend more time getting all the cheat day stuff together. So he doesn't have time for all these costume things.
Yeah, he's like, I don't have time for this. I have to eat my like plate of 17 chocolate chip cookies.
Exactly.
I like him though. I mean, I don't know of anything like bad that he's done other than just like exist and like maybe not do the best movies. I tweeted, I was like, I'll be very brave and say it because no one else is, that Jack Black literally deserved an Oscar for his performance in that movie. Because it is so fucking good. I laugh so hard every time he's playing like a teenage girl named Bethany. And it is believable. Like, I've never like seen an actor acting their ass off, and I'm like, I believe that a woman was transported into Jack Black's body. What about you?
So I watched all of the Hunger Games movies.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to go back and see all of them again. And I think Finnick Odair is my favorite character, which is a hot take.
I love Finnick. I don't think we like really talked about him much in the pod.
Yeah, but I think he's just like, he's the one that everyone expects to be problematic, but he's not. He's a real guy with real feelings. Like, I feel like he's the kind of guy who would post on social media and be like, guys, we need to try therapy.
Yeah, he's like a tender lover and an amazing partner. He's everything that you want.
I wasn't really watching much, but then I had a whole scenario where at like 1 a.m. I saw a roach in my room, and that really freaked me out and took an hour and a half to kill him because I was really scared and I didn't know that they could walk on walls and I didn't know that they could fly. And I feel like everything just went wrong after that happened. And I was like trying to like protect myself in a cocoon on my bed. I couldn't fall asleep because every like small sound I thought I heard, I thought it was another roach. So I watched the Lego movie to calm down and go to sleep too. I think the Lego movie is really underrated.
Everything's awesome.
Yeah, it is awesome. Thank you, Brooke.
Everything's awesome when you're part of a team.
But I think people like hate the Lego movie because it is like capitalism at its finest, but it's also like, it's such a genius idea of like bringing in the toy aspect into like the real world equivalent, and like the maker is like the hand that's playing with all the Legos. I don't know. I think it's genius.
I'll have to rewatch. I've only seen it once in theaters.
It was my assigned reading. My school assigned reading, my summer reading, like going into maybe junior year of high school or something. Who's Your Daddy Wise, Will Ferrell's father plays saxophone and keyboards for the Righteous Brothers, which was like a big kind of band back in the day, which I didn't know. And then Alison Brie is also in it. Her father is a musician and freelance entertainment reporter. After I go to sleep watching the Lego movie, I wake up, everything's fine. But then I remember what happened. So then I watch another movie to go back to sleep where I can hide from the night's occurrences. And so I watched Wonder Woman to go to sleep, which is, a iconic fave. Didn't see much of it because I was mostly unconscious. And when I woke up, my screen was black. So I don't know. It worked. I'm a big fan of watching things to fall asleep. I think it has to be things that you know really well so that you don't have to watch it. But it's a pretty big Nepo movie. Chris Pine is a really big Nepo baby. His father, Robert Pine, co-starred on Chips, and he was in Days of Our Lives. His mother is Gwen Guilford, who was an actress but ended up retiring and going into the study of psychotherapy. So George III might have needed her. And then Chris Pine's grandmother was Anne Gwyn, who was one of the first ever scream queens. and was a big like pinup model during World War II. And then Danny Huston, who plays the bad guy that we think is Ares in the movie, is also a huge name. His dad was director John Huston, who worked on many famous movies, especially Maltese Falcon. His grandfather was Oscar winner Walter Huston, and he is half siblings with Angelica Huston, who is, the People's Morticia Addams. And then I took out the dead corpse of the roach out of my room. And I was feeling so bad thinking about that there's a roach family in mourning right now, and it's because of me. So I watched Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them to calm down. I don't care for the other movies, but the first one, fantastic film. Could quote the whole thing. Catherine Waterston, her mom was a former model, and her dad is Sam Waterston, who was in Law and Order and The Great Gatsby, a bunch of stuff. Her older brother played Jared, I don't know how you say it, Pitts in Dead Poet Society, who is one of the students, and he's the third student to get on the desk. if you're a big fan of Dead Poet Society. Dan Fogler, this isn't really like a Nepo thing, but I just didn't realize that he had such a theater background. He was actually in the original cast of the 25th annual Putnam Spelling Bee, and he actually won a Tony for that. And then Ezra Miller, their father, was the senior vice president of Hyperion Books, which I thought was interesting because that's the publisher of Percy Jackson, which Brooke has not read. And then John Voight, who I don't like, but his brother wrote the song Wild Thing, which I didn't know. The wild thing, you make my heart sing, you make everything groovy. His brother wrote that. I started watching The Favorite, but I wasn't really getting into it, but it has Nicholas Hoult, who I think Nicholas Hoult kind of always now plays historic asshole characters. And then I was thinking about how he plays an asshole character in The Great, who is by the same guy who wrote The Favorite. So then I did break my streaming service streak, and I have been watching The Great on Hulu, which I don't feel good about, but also I feel like I have a life purpose now because being off of streaming services means that I don't have access to TV series, which means that I don't feel like I have a path forward. Like, when you have a show, like you have a path, you have something to do next. When you finish a movie, there's just like screen goes blank and you just sit there with dread. So I'm feeling fulfilled and not fulfilled, but so I've been watching The Great, which I really love. I think it's a great way of like being based on a historical story, but like also not giving a shit about any of it. Like they play like badminton at one point, and so they're in like period clothes, but then they have like sports headbands and everything, and like there's a big part where kind of crossover with Queen Charlotte, because the British ambassador comes over to ask them for money, and the American ambassador is also there, and they're like, the American ambassador is like, the big thing that we're going to change is the spelling of color. We're taking out the U, and the British ambassador is like, you bitch. And so they really go all the way in, which I really like. Who's Your Daddy perspective. Elle Fanning, her maternal grandfather was American football player Rick Arrington, and her aunt is ESPN reporter Jill Arrington. Since her sister is Dakota Fanning, Elle started out by playing the younger version of her sister's characters, so that's kind of how she started. And then Nicholas Hoult, his paternal grand aunt was Dame Anna Neagle, a stage and film actress active in the 1930s and 40s. Nicholas Hoult is kind of known now for playing historical characters in The Great and The Favorite, but she was also known for playing historical characters. For example, she played Queen Victoria. So I think that whole family has, I guess, that face.
Yeah,
that looks
like
old-timey.
They haven't seen an iPhone.
And then Belinda Bromelow is married to Tony McNamara, so that's why she's kind of in everything there.
All right. Well, where can they find us, Marriya?
They can find us at Remake Hot Take on YouTube, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Letterboxd, my heart. And they can find me at Marriya Schwarz on everything that I said, and Gmail.
They can find me at B_ReeseCup on Instagram.
Okay, Brooke, how is your head feeling?
It still hurts, but the crown was really what was weighing heavy on me, which is not metaphorical. It actually was.
The weight of the power of the British people were on
right
you.
On like the temples. But yeah,
your body is a temple.
Let's see. I've taken out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 bobby pins so far.
Yay. Bye.